properly analyze the data, that it actually turns out Vermont is a state that for every dollar we pay into the federal government, we only get back 75 cents, so it would be a net gain economically. I mean, you know, some states are net winners, I mean, big winners on that kind of cost-benefit analysis of places. You know, most of the southern states, New Mexico, some of the states in the Great Plains, the losers of places like California, Connecticut, New Jersey, they pay in much more than they get back. So financially, it's our view that it's just morally obscene to be, I mean, Vermont's share of the Pentagon budget, if you take the strict budget of about $700 billion, our pro rata share is about $1.5 billion. And you know, you could buy a lot of stuff for $1.5 billion. The state's been running a $150 million deficit, and Dennis Steele enjoys going to gubernatorial debates and saying, well, if you're worried about the $150 million, you know, let's split. And we immediately up front save $1.5 billion in our share of the military. There are two schools of thought within the movement in that regard. And one school of thought says we've got to have answers to every one of your questions that you pose laid out. And Vermont Commons has a list, I think, of 13 principles. A couple of our candidates for the Senate, Robert Wagner and Galen Brown, actually have fairly precise economic game plans to address those issues. I take a slightly more general approach and say I would like Vermont to become the Switzerland of North America. And so I can tell you some characteristics of Switzerland, you know, that are appealing to me, ranging from you know, neutrality, highly decentralized, perhaps linking the currency to some kind of precious metals, maybe a tax haven. Switzerland is a country that produces about 2/3 of its own food, even though it's the land is quite extreme. It's very mountainous, but they have very sophisticated incentives for Swiss farmers. The Swiss model, economically, politically, socially, environmentally, survivability. I mean, there's no, you know, they go back to 1240 or something like that. They've been around a while. They do a few things right. See, I'm not convinced that we have to have the precise answers to the economic game plan. We debate this all the time within the movement. And I come down more from the side is that we've got to sell secession and independence. And then as it starts to get increasing traction, then people will come on board who have an interest in money, banking, food, or whatever it is. But one would certainly hope so, that if you're freeing up a lot of these government regulations that are very repressive. In the present gubernatorial campaign, the lieutenant governor, who's the hand-picked candidate of the conservative governor, Douglas, is kind of running on a platform that Vermont has a bad business climate. The taxes are high and there are regulations. And see, I think when Vermont secedes, when it becomes independent, our problem is going to be large numbers of people wanting to come to this tiny little country, and the question is going to be how do we avoid being overwhelmed? That could actually happen if there's one more major act of terrorism in the country while we're still in the United States. You could have tens of thousands of people moving in from New York and Boston just overnight. I mean, there was some play after 9/11. A lot of new country homes were bought from New Yorkers. Probably the most likely would be a complete collapse of the dollar. if the Chinese pull the plug on their holding our treasury bonds, that could trigger a collapse of the U.S. economy. I would say, and in which case, right now, there are some people who are feeling pain, but for the most part, they don't have enough influence to change the system. And if the pain was up 2 years ago temporarily, and they fixed it with the stimulus and the bailouts and all of that stuff, there are many who think that was really just a temporary fix, that's not sustainable. And so I would say collapse of the U.S. economy.